What's going on, everybody? It's Ricky with Videohomicide, back with another movie review slash recommendation. Today we're going to go back to the year 1958 to take a look at a film directed by Terence Fisher. That film is none other than The Horror of Dracula. Yes, this is an absolute staple in any, cinematic fans' education. Like, this needs to be watched. This is an example of taking something that was never broken, but like totally reinventing it and taking it into the next era of cinema, if you want to call it that. Because before we had movies like Horror of Dracula, we had the Universal monster films, we had a Turkish Dracula film, there was a couple of other Dracula-ish vampire films pre-Horror of Dracula, but this was the one that brought it into the forefront. As far as I'm concerned, this is one of the best. Anything that I know, this is Hammer, but when I say Universal, I say it because like Universal sort of like paved the way for this type of film to be made in the first place. So I consider Dracula a Universal monster, even though he's been in the Hammer films, if that makes sense. This is actually the first Hammer review during my blood-sucking Creature of the Night-a-thon 2025. I've been watching a lot of... I've watched all the Nosferatu films. I'm starting on the Hammer. I'm probably going to end it off with the Universal flicks. Probably not going to go through all the Universal ones, but I am going to be going through all 9 Hammer Dracula films because it's been a long time since I've seen them all. One of them I actually watched for the first time, called Brides of Dracula, which will be the next vampire film review on the channel. But let's get into this one. So Christopher Lee plays Count Dracula and Peter Cushing plays Van Helsing. So you've got two juggernauts, absolute fucking juggernauts of cinema history coming together. I don't know if this was them coming together for the first time. I don't know what year Horror Express is, but they were also both in Horror Express. This might have actually been after the fact, but this is great stuff. And one thing I forgot to mention with this particular tape, I have this on DVD. I have another VHS of this, but this was the one with like the most badass artwork on it. Look at the size of that fucking label there, man. Like, this is how you know you're talking old school Warner Brothers. I think my copy of Exorcist is like that as well. This Warner Brothers sort of color strip on the top thing. Maybe they went a little insane on the size there, but this movie brings Dracula into a like a bloody menace. Okay, we don't see him as a bat in this film, which is something I sort of forgot to mention in the last couple vampire reviews. I love seeing bats in my Dracula films. Okay, so back then they weren't utilized as much as I think they should have been. I know that rats were, for fuck's sake, especially if you're talking any of the Nosferatu films, 1922, 2024, the 79 version. It's just rat alley, for fuck's sakes. It's gross. It's the plague, the bubonic plague. But this version of Dracula, it takes a story and it goes in a different route. Like, I'm so used to this fucking Nosferatu formula for like the last week that it's refreshing to sort of break free from that and even break free from the the Boris Karloff, or excuse me, the Bela Lugosi version. We've got Jonathan Harker, who's like this dude who's like already on his way to go kill Dracula. It's not, he's not a fucking real estate agent. He's not Renfield. He's like acting as he's going to be his librarian and all this stuff. He gets locked in the room at night, and he has this encounter with a woman vampire in the castle, and then we get that shot like when she tries to bite Jonathan Harker. It just cuts to fucking Christopher Lee in the full like regalia of blood, teeth, crazy fucked up eyes, and just that shot is so iconic to me. Of course, there's other stuff in this film that's very very much up my alley, and like especially like later on, like in this film, like when Dracula dies, he turns into like dust, and how he dies is basically Van Helsing rips the fucking curtain off the wall, and there's your first Hammer Dracula death. So in terms of my favorite scene in this movie, it's probably that scene that I just explained of him like doing the freak out, but he has other moments in the film that are very eerie, very perverted in a way. I know there's a lot of like talk of perverseness with Dracula, but this one like takes the cake, because there's a shot where like Dracula is going to see this woman, and he goes into her room, and like the shot is just like of Dracula like in the forefront, and then the girl in the background, and like Dracula just closing the door, and like it cuts to them inside the room. But I thought it would be like, it'd be more out of control if they just fucking like left it at that, you know, and went to the next scene. But Horror of Dracula, man, a really good one. Obviously pair this one with Curse of Frankenstein, another Peter Cushing, Christopher Lee endeavor, and a damn good one. I probably, like, in terms of Curse of Frankenstein, Horror of Dracula, I'll go for Curse of Frankenstein. I just think it's a more fun for me. But this is definitely a must watch, especially if you're doing this sort of vampire journey. You know, anybody that just, you know, got into vampire films by way of that new Nosferatu, here's some suggestions. Watch these fucking movies. With that being said, I want to let everybody know that Cinema 187, which is my horror exploitation art zine, is now in its 6th issue. This is the all satanic issue. There's 120 pages, 34 contributing artists. If you want to order a copy of this, you can message me at cinema.187 on Instagram, or you can go to the link in the description of this video, go to my website, there's a how to order page, shoot me an email, and we'll go from there. So with that being said, long live Christopher Lee. What's going on, everybody? It's Ricky with Videohomicide, back with another movie review / recommendation. Today we're going to go back to the year 1960 to take a look at another film directed by Terence Fisher. We're talking about Brides of Dracula. Yes, this is the follow-up to the 1958 Horror of Dracula. This one does not have Christopher Lee in it as Dracula. As a matter of fact, there's no Dracula character in this film. There is Van Helsing, played by Peter Cushing. There's a girl who's like going to the mountains to go to some sort of school, but she ends up you know, getting distracted on her way there. She goes to a not a diner, but like an inn. You know, there's in all these fucking Dracula films, I'm not complaining, but in all these Dracula films, there's an inn with like a fucking fat bald dude, you know, that's like one fucking eye half closed, mustache and all that shit, telling, like, warning you and all this stuff. But in this one, they're basically like, listen, there's no rooms, get the fuck out of here. And just by chance, this woman comes in, or just by chance, a woman comes in and you know, decides to whisper away to her place to stay for the night, basically. And she discovers that there is a son that's chained up in the house, and you know, he's like, oh, here's the keys over here, go get the key and release me. Well, he's a fucking vampire, okay? And the mom had him chained up for good reason. There's like this house helper, you know, a fucking nanny, if you will, that's sort of taking care of him, bringing him young women and shit like that to kill, and, you know, or to suck their fucking blood, their essence. All right, to go down on them in the way of fucking bloodshed. So he escapes, and, you know, our main girl, she meets Van Helsing, or Van Helsing sort of like finds her, like, fucking after she ran away, and he basically saves the day. You know, like, this movie's not that deep. Dracula, he fucking he kills some other chick that's like jealous of our main girl, because our main girl gets tied up with this Dracula character, not knowing he's Dracula. Oh, he's a baron, he's gonna marry me, blah blah blah. This girl's jealous, and Dracula comes along and he fucking kills her ass. But my favorite part of this movie is definitely the ending, because they kill Dracula in what I consider a very creative way. So they all end up at this old mill, sort of like, you know, Frankenstein. And matter of fact, I can think of a few movies that end in mills. I think, doesn't the Sleepy Hollow film with Johnny Depp end at a mill? But nonetheless, Dracula, Peter Cushing have a little bit of a fight. Or not Dracula, I forget what his name is in the film, but the Dracula guy, him and Peter Cushing, they get into it at this mill. Fire gets started and all this shit, and like Peter Cushing like ends up getting on the spinny thing, you know, like the propellers of the windmill, and it looks like a cross, and like there's a fire behind it, so it's casting a shadow of a cross down on Dracula, and that's how he dies in the film. And I thought that was really cool, man. I like that, because I definitely remember Dracula dying in Horror of Dracula. I remember him dying in Dracula 1931, and Jesus Christ, it's cool to see sort of other interpretations, because now that I think about it, so there's 9 Hammer Horror Dracula films, and I'm starting to think that maybe I haven't seen all 9 of them. Okay, I've definitely seen the ones that I got in the collection, but I don't think that amounts to 9. So it's going to be interesting to go through these films. The one I'm most excited to watch, and it's been so long since I watched it, is this one right here. And I'm pretty sure this is Has Risen from the Grave. I'm pretty sure this is the one that ends with Dracula getting like that big gold cross through the chest. But again, it's been years since I watched this. I can remember taking this from my dad's place back to my mom's place, because I would go to my dad's on the weekends when I was a kid, right? And I remember borrowing this movie and watching it, and like being scared of watching it without my dad. It was fucked. But you know, Brides of Dracula, you can check it out. It's nothing, you know, for anything you get a Peter Cushing, a good Peter Cushing Van Helsing. I wouldn't go out of my way to watch this one, but it's definitely necessary in this task that I've given myself of watching all the Hammer Dracula, watching all the Hammer Frankenstein, and just sort of revisiting some of my favorites, and also in preparation of the next issue of Cinema 187, which is actually in its 6th issue right now. You can order this. This is 120 pages, 34 artists. It's fucking awesome, and this is all satanic films. So the next issue, Universal Horror and Hammer Horror. So, and I'm going to be including like Nosferatu. I've even considered including movies like The Blob, and just sort of other, you know, staples of you know, between the dawn of the century and all the way up into like the 50s and 70s pretty much is when it's going to end. So I'm looking forward to continuing the adventure, and I appreciate everybody for watching this video. Make sure you leave a 666 in the comments. Come back tomorrow for a new video. Who the fuck knows what it's going to be. I've just been like on a recording binge. I've just been watching these flicks and just like recording the vids, and you know, I'm having a blast with it, man. So who knows, if the vids start slowing down, it's because I've sort of, you know, had too much hash in the old ass. So I appreciate you guys for watching. Audio 666. What's going on, everybody? It's Ricky with Video Homicide, back with another movie review / recommendation. Today we're going to go back to the year 1966 to take a look at another film directed by Terence Fisher. We've got Dracula, Prince of Darkness. So this is now the 3rd installment in the Hammer Dracula film series, and it's been probably like 20 years, maybe more, maybe 25 years since I've watched this film. Way back in the day at the old man's, going over there, like I said, going to my dad's on the weekends and just binging a bunch of movies, everything from The Blob to, you know, Lucio Fulci's Zombie, to the Hammer Dracula films, the Universal films, and pretty much everything in between. Movies like Colors were a staple in the house. Clockwork Orange, I know I've said this a million times, like I watched that so young that I'm very much desensitized to a lot of fucked up stuff, and I find humor in a lot of really twisted situations when it comes to movies. So, you know, and I don't blame my dad for that. As a matter of fact, I thank him, because, you know, I remember the first time I went to a buddy's house and we watched a movie. It was Bad Boys Part 2. And buddy's dad like fast forwarded like a couple scenes, and I was like, what? I was like, that's nothing. You know, that is nothing. It's, I think Heavy Metal, the animated film, is more explicit than Bad Boys 2. I mean, yeah, sure, there's a lot of swearing, there's references to drugs, there's nudity and stuff like that, but like I'd seen fucking, like I said, Clockwork Orange, I'd seen a bunch of like weirdo movies from the 70s that were very much like, you know, sexualized. Like, I mean, like my dad wasn't showing me like straight up porno when I was a kid, but if he was watching a movie, if he had movies he wanted to watch, those are what we're gonna watch, you know what I mean? And all those fucked up haunted shows. But again, the Dracula films, the Frankenstein films, and like to me, like this is why I like James Rolfe. Okay, I know you can say what you want about that guy at this point in his career, but at one point, like this guy was, you know, it was almost like he had the same sort of upbringing in terms of movies. Like you sort of watch like a lot of the classic shit first. Like I remember watching Dracula. Frankenstein, Wolfman, The Mummy, specifically those 4 films. Like, some of my earliest memories are watching those, but same with Clockwork Orange. Like, Bad Alex. Like, let's watch Bad Alex. Let's watch, my dad would always say when we would come home from the store, because he used to live above a variety store, but it was overpriced, so we'd walk down the street, get our shit from the store, and then come back, and then Buddy working the store would see us coming back and would be mad because he was also the landlord, but he was a fucking cocksucker. He used to rat on me because I was chronically skipping school back in high school, and he would tell my dad, he'd be like, your son don't go to school and all this bullshit, and I'm like, hey, fuck your whole family, okay? Now, when we would come up the stairs, he would say, he would go like that. This is when I was a young kid, and I knew, like, oh, make the sign of the cross to fucking kill the vampire. Or he would say brains, and then you have to, like, make it look like you're loading a gun and then shooting him in the head. Or like the silver bullet, rip the earring up. Like, there was this whole fucking movement. I love the old man, honestly. He showed me a lot of good films, and this is one of them. Although I don't personally own this film, but I remember parts of this movie. So basically, the third installment, we don't got Peter Cushing, but we do get Christopher Lee back, so that's a plus. The story is basically about these 4 would-be travelers, like, traveling the countryside in Germany on like, they're from England or some bullshit, and they end up getting told not to go to this castle. Like, there's this castle, blah blah blah, and they're just told against it. And this priest comes out of nowhere. Well, actually, like, in the beginning of the film, this priest sort of stops this would-be vampire slaying happening. He's like, no, Dracula's been dead for 10 years, blah blah blah, you're fucking paranoid and all this stuff. Well, it turns out Dracula is still around in essence, because these people, against the town's wishes, they end up going to Dracula's castle. Well, kind of by chance, right? Like, they get dropped off by the fucking, the cart master won't go any further, and then all of a sudden here comes Dracula's fucking cart, picks him up, takes him to the castle. Food's laid out, booze, dope, mushrooms, the whole fucking, all the bells and whistles are laid out for them. But the one girl's like, I have a bad feeling about this. A bad feeling. And at this point, we're in the 60s, so, like, the chicks go, like, in these Hammer films, like, they go from, like, looking straight 50s to, like, now we're talking, like, mid-60s. They got the hairdo, all that stuff. Of course, it's still set in, like, Victorian times, Gothic, and all that shit. It's a great-looking film. The castle looks awesome. Not dirty enough for my liking. I like my Dracula castles to be very filthy and rotten, but, like, some parts need to be more inviting than others, as Bela Lugosi would say. So, or roughly he says that. Now, the interesting part about how Dracula comes back to be in this film, I think, is interesting, because what happens is one of the 4 tourist people, he ends up getting taken out by the what do you call him, the butler of Dracula's castle, who's like, my master's been dead for years, but he always wants it ready for guests, basically waiting so he can be resurrected. And it's cool because, like, he ends up getting down to, like, this cellar. He gets fucking killed, stabbed, and then the butler, he uses, like, this crazy crane contraption, which I'm sure is, like, an actual thing, to lift up the body over Dracula's coffin. Then he, like, pours his ashes into the coffin, like, in a nice urn, like a nice fucking, like, $3,000 urn. He pours it in there, and then he drips the blood. He cuts the guy's throat off camera, but there's a lot of blood being spilt in this one, especially in that scene. It's like a lot of fucking blood just falling on it, and then Dracula sort of, like, you see, like, the form of a skeleton, and then a whole bunch of fog comes in. It looks really cool. It's almost like the end of Blackula, but in reverse. You know what I mean? And then you see the hand come up, and Dracula's back to life. So, takes out some of these assholes, and it comes down to this one couple, and the guy's chick ends up getting stolen, and the main guy, if you want to call him that, he teams up with this priest from the beginning of the film that has a gun and all this shit. And the ending of this film, because it's kind of like, to me, this one was kind of a quickie, you know what I mean? It wasn't like, there wasn't a whole lot to it. So all of a sudden it's the fucking end of the movie, and Dracula is killed in what I consider my least favorite way so far in the 3 films that I've watched. So in the first one, he gets killed by Van Helsing with the cross and the curtain coming down. The second one, the windmill makes the sign of the cross. Now this one, he ends up walking on, like, some ground where there's running water underneath, which is a Dracula the thing that'll kill Dracula. And this is the thing that I remember of the movie when I was a kid, him falling into the water like that. And it's like, that's it? That's how Dracula, like, that's one of the ways Dracula dies? I don't know. I just didn't really remember. Like, I remember the scene, but I just don't remember, like, you know, that being the end of it. So, again, it's a good film. It's a Christopher Lee Dracula film. You're going to get some awesome Christopher Lee faces, his bloodshot eyes, him, like, there's that one scene that I mentioned in Horror of Dracula when he first, you know, when you first see him as, like, the pissed off Dracula. They kind of mirror that shot in this film, but it's like got a bunch of reds behind it. His eyes are really red, and it's awesome. So, you know, it is obviously a must watch if you're going through this history of Hammer horror film, to sort of broaden your knowledge on this stuff, because to me Dracula is one of the staples of cinematic monsters. You know, he's the monster. But well, not the monster is fucking Boris Karloff Frankenstein, but I mean, like, he's Dracula. And I gotta say, it's been my least favorite so far, but I am excited because the next one in order of chronologically, the next one in order is what was my favorite when I was a kid. So, and I haven't watched it in like 20 years, maybe even longer. Very excited to check that one out. So, I appreciate everybody for watching. Make sure you leave a 666 in the comments. That was Dracula, Prince of Darkness, 1966. Have a lovely day. Adios. What's going on, everybody? It's Ricky with Videohomicide, back with another movie review / recommendation. Today we're going to go back to the year 1968 to take a look at a film directed by Freddie Francis. That film is Hammer's Dracula Has Risen from the Grave. Yes, when I was a kid, this was my favorite one to watch out of the Hammer flicks, and now upon a rewatch for the first time in a very long time, I gotta say, the only reason I prefer Horror of Dracula to this one is because Peter Cushing is in it. So this takes a close second for me. This is a phenomenal film. I love that this movie takes more of like an exploitation-y feel to it, and what I mean by that is it's very sort of raunchy and sleazy at parts, and it's also got its you know, there's like a carriage chase, like this barmaid chick who constantly has her fucking tits hanging out. She's being chased by Dracula's ghoul. So basically, before we get too far ahead of ourselves, okay, what I want to say is this movie, and I've been excited the whole time throughout this Hammer rewatch to like remember how they came back, how they died. So I obviously knew how he died in this one, but it had been so long since I watched it. I'm like, how the fuck does Dracula come back? Like in the last one, he was submerged in water and that's what killed him. In this one, we've got the story of a priest, and basically he discovers that there's a dead body inside this bell of the church. It's actually discovered by like this little deaf mute kid, but this bell has a fucking half-naked chick in there dead with the Dracula bites. One thing I gotta say, the bites look really good in this film. They're definitely the best looking bites on the neck that I've seen so far. I did take a few notes because I feel like there's a decent amount to talk about with this one. So basically, Dracula comes back to life by this priest who goes to see the castle because there's this dead body. He's joined by this other priest, and he falls at one point and like on this blanket of ice basically, and Dracula's there. The guy busts his head open so the blood goes into Dracula's mouth. That explains how we get Dracula back into motion. The priest guy sort of becomes this ghoul. If you've seen Vampire in Brooklyn, I forget the name of the actor, but the guy that like becomes Eddie Murphy's ghoul in the film, that's sort of what this priest dude has become, but a much more depressing version than Vampire in Brooklyn, that's for sure. So yeah, there's like a car chase with a carriage, which like I said, it's sort of like it's exploitation-y. I don't know, it's just the only way I can describe it. It's getting into the later 60s, and we're just getting a little bit more insanity, I would say. One thing that's funny, when these priests go up to the castle to sort of like, you know, to bless it or whatever, Dracula's castle, like there's the huge beautiful doorway, and it's just sealed with a single 2x4. It's like, I thought that was hilarious. Dracula ends up, you know, storing his coffin underneath of this. It's like a bar, and then underneath of it is a bakery, and then underneath of that sort of like a sewer system, and that's where Dracula's body is being stored. The barmaiden chick, she gets fucked up by Dracula at one point, and she's sort of a jealous type because she's sort of fucking around with this guy named Paul. The reason I say Paul like that is because in Curse of Frankenstein, Dracula's partner is named Paul, and there's a part where he's like, Paul! I always thought that shit was funny as fuck, but so yeah, I like the resting place underneath of the bakery and all that shit. There's a scene in here where Dracula gets stabbed with a stake. It's actually on the back of the VHS tape. So if you just bought this, you'd be like, what the fuck? Well, obviously Dracula gets staked out in a lot of these films, but there's that on the back cover. But what happens is a lot of good blood comes out, by the way, as well. It's a very bloody scene. Looks great. The blood looks great. But basically, if you don't say a prayer while killing Dracula, it won't kill him. So our main guy, Paul, he's basically a fucking atheist or whatever, doesn't believe in God or whatever, but by the end, of course, he's doing the whole fucking thing. He ends up getting attached to this Paul's girlfriend and sort of stalking her out, and our priest guy, she fucks off, and he sees, like, the priest sees Dracula fucking around with the daughter, chases him over the rooftops, and then the other priest fucking bashes him in the head with a brick, kills him eventually, and it leads into a shot, or to like a little bit of a scene where the girl, Paul's girlfriend, is on this rooftop, and Dracula is like fucking the background. The only way I can describe it is it's like total giallo. It looks like a total fucking giallo. Like the lighting looks phenomenal, fantastic. Dracula and his ghoul, they end up stealing this chick and taking her to the castle, and that's where the end happens. And the thing is, I remember this being such like much more of a fight at the end, but basically what happens is our guy Paul goes up to Dracula. Dracula lunges at him and tries to throw him over this ledge, and then by chance he falls over the ledge and he fucking lands on top of the gold cross, which is the scene that's seared in my memory since I was a kid. And then our priest, who is the ghoul, he's feeling bad and he does the prayer, and Dracula dies right there on the spot. So great film, good ending, good Dracula film. This, like I said, this was way better than Prince of Darkness, way better than Brides of Dracula, but again, it does not surpass Horror of Dracula, only because of Peter Cushing. And truth be told, you get a decent amount of Dracula in this film, but not as much as I'd like. I mean, you get the cool eyes, you get the bloody eyes and all that stuff. It looks great, but just a little bit more Dracula would have been nice. But I did like all the sort of side characters, like the bartender guy who's like pissed drunk the whole time, you can tell. And there's just like a whole lot of fun to be had in this film. It's a good one, definitely second favorite so far. So how would I rate Dracula's death out of this one? To me, it's like probably, I like this death much more than Horror of Dracula, because in that one, basically what happens is he gets the fucking windows, the curtain gets ripped open, and there, across. It's super simple. This one, I like it. But like I said, when I was a kid, I remember him like falling all like fucking dramatically and all this stuff. It's pretty quick. It's like, they get to the castle and then fucking bam, it's done. So a great one. Don't sleep on this one. Directed by Freddie Francis. I believe the first one not directed by Terrence Fisher. So 1968's Dracula Has Risen from the Grave. Shout out to my dad for letting me watch this movie a million times when I was a kid. And, I got, I think, 8 or maybe 5 more Hammer Dracula films to go after this. So stay tuned. Stay safe out there, and 666 in the comments. What's going on, everybody? It's Ricky with Videohomicide, back with another movie review / recommendation. Today we're going to go back to the year 1970 to take a look at a film directed by Peter Sasti, and that film is none other than the 5th installment in the Hammer Dracula franchise. We've got Taste the Blood of Dracula. This movie's pretty fucking goddamn good, I can't lie. So basically, I'd made the review for Dracula Has Risen from the Grave, and the homie Danny B from the Trash Dash left a comment saying, hey, the next one you're gonna dig it. So I watched it, man, and I did. I fucking thoroughly enjoyed this film. I even took notes, okay, like a good neighbor. I almost said like a good neighbor. State Farm is there. I've been smoking a little hash tonight, so I got Dracula on one hand, and I got hash pipe in the other. Taste the blood of Dracula's castle. Basically, it starts off with these three like people in this carriage. One of them is actually the father from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, the father of the greedy little girl. He plays this guy who like is some sort of snake oil salesman type, and he ends up getting kicked off of the carriage that he's riding on, and he stumbles upon like the basic the bottom of Dracula's castle, where Dracula had passed away in the last installment, whereas he fell on the fucking cross. So he almost has like a flashback where he sees Dracula die on the cross, and he sees his robe fall and his ring and his all of his garments and stuff, and his blood turns to powder. So we don't see him gather it up really, but he gathers up all these items and takes the blood, and then he's sort of forgotten about for a little bit. Then we get introduced to our real three characters, which are these three rich types that are going to a fucking like a whorehouse. Chick dancing around with a giant snake. It's out of control, but these guys are basically the types where they're trying to, like, you know, almost like Uncle Frank from fucking Hellraiser, how he's sort of trying to find like the next level of enjoyment. Like, they're bored of like going to the horror house and this and that, and so basically they end up getting one of their main hoes taken from them by this young guy, and they basically invite him out for dinner, and he says, listen, I can show you guys some next level shit, but it's gonna cost you some money. So he takes these three old geezers to the fucking father of the Willy Wonka chick, and they buy all the Dracula stuff, and they go to Dracula's castle, and they end up doing all these fucking rituals and stuff. And the way that Dracula's brought back in this one, I thought was really fucking cool. So basically what happens is this ghoul, this servant of Dracula, who we find out is a servant of Dracula in a bit, he basically pours a little bit of the powdered blood in each one of these guys' drinks, and then he cuts his hand, and then he puts a drop of his blood, and then they like fill up, overflow, and you know, basically what they have to do is drink this blood in order to bring back Dracula. So what happens is the servant drinks this fucking this concoction, starts convulsing, and then they all proceed to kick the shit out of him until he's dead. And, you know, his body lays there, and then it, like, you know, there's some fog and some bullshit, and he turns to ash, and then all of a sudden, boom, Christopher Lee is exposed, and he's basically out to get revenge on his servant. He's got these three guys to kill, and it's kind of cool how he decides to take them out. So the one of the three, the reason I laugh is because the way I worded this, the main guy of the three, you know, Uncle Frank Hellraiser types, he starts boozing heavily, right? And he's very sort of like borderline creepy with his daughter at one point or another. But basically, his daughter is the first that's turned by Dracula, and then you know, he uses the children of these three assholes that fucked him over, or fucked his servant over, in order to get to them, and kills them one at a time. There's some decent bloodshed in this film. Sorry, I'm just trying to read my notes here. I don't want to leave anything. Oh, the main asshole drunkard fucking sexual fucking predator type guy, his daughter ends up hitting him in the head with a shovel and cracks his head wide open and he dies. You know, one thing about this film, like, it all ends up at the church again, and you know, there's a bunch of crosses and stuff. You know, and Dracula's basically being stopped by this, you know, the boyfriend of the one girl. Like, he's sort of a forgettable guy, whatever. His name's Pole, though. They're all fucking named Pole in all these Hammer horror films, I noticed, man. But basically, Dracula dies because he's blocked in. He can't leave this church area because there's a cross on the door, and there's a cross like on the stained glass window, and he just basically dies like that because of like a bunch of candles light all of a sudden, and then there's some prayer noise in the background, and he dies. Like, lamest death yet. Like, honestly, when I look back on like when he falls into the water, like when the ground breaks and it falls into the water, like, that is better than this one. It was just sort of like it was more abrupt than part one. You know, good film. You know, and it looked good, and like Christopher Lee looked great. Got some good blood and stuff. I liked all the banter with these guys, these assholes, and like, it was a good time. It's definitely not my favorite, but it's probably it's got to be my favorite way that Dracula comes back in these films so far. You know, like the close second is, I believe, in Brides of Dracula, when that guy like hangs Buddy and fucking drops his blood on Dracula's ashes. That was a good bring back. But no, this was a good one, man. I'm so glad that I'm watching all these Hammer flicks, because you know, I forgot how good they were. Like this one right here, like I have under the name of Blood of Dracula's Castle. Now, what I think happened, unless there's a film that's actually called Blood of Dracula's Castle, I think the old man might have got the fucking the title wrong on this, or maybe it was billed wrong wherever he taped it from. But yeah, this was a good one. Once again, Christopher Lee does not disappoint, other than the way he dies in this film. Now, I've been warned by Trash Dash that the next one we get some bats. Finally, I fucking love vampire bats, and I'm looking forward to seeing what happens. I sort of have a vague inclination of how he comes back by way of looking shit up on the internet. I didn't like look at the whole plot. I just sort of, when I was going through, you know, these films and just trying to, you know, get my shit together, because like this is a big, like, daunting thing. Like, to watch 9 films, you know, is like, mind you, I watched 8 fucking Harry Potter films with my wife over the last like month. But like, this to me is like, it's an educational thing. Like, when I watch Harry Potter, I'm just watching it because I'm like, whatever. This to me is horror history, and it's something that I'm very passionate about. And like, to sit down, watch these at an age now where I can actually appreciate them in their full, and you know, document my thoughts by way of these fucking YouTube videos. So I appreciate everybody for watching. Make sure you leave a 666 in the comments. And the next installment, I believe, is called Scars of Dracula, which I don't think that I own at all. So we'll be checking that one out by way of the interwebs. So adios. What's going on, everybody? It's Ricky with Videohomicide, back with another movie review / recommendation. Today we're going to go back to the year 1970 to take a look at a film directed by Roy Ward Baker, and that film is the 6th installment in the Hammer Horror Dracula franchise, Scars of Dracula. So once again, I've got my handy dandy note-taking sheet here, just to sort of let me know of the parts I want to hit on with this film. So first and foremost, how is Dracula brought back to life? Well, my friends, in a very fucking horrific and gothic manner. So a vampire bat flies into the cathedral, or the castle Dracula, and pukes blood onto the remains of Dracula, which I thought was fucking awesome. Resurrects his corpse. You know, the bat is cheesy in most shots that it's all throughout the film. Like, there's a lot of bat action, which I like, but in that early portion of the film where it shows it like puking the blood, I know it's not puking the blood, but I say puking because it sounds better than spitting the blood. He's vomiting blood all over fucking corpse of Dracula, brings him back to life, and when he's doing that, it's like a very, you know, 1970s bat, like what some makeup effects artist thought a vampire bat should look like. It's awesome. I love that. That was one of my favorite parts of the film. So with Dracula back in action, the villagers come and they burn the fucking castle down. One of the villagers, like the guy that works the bakery / pub, he's been in these films for like the last 2 or 3 fucking installments. So he's getting more shine than Christopher Lee. And one thing I will say about this, they don't really fuck around in this movie. It's not like half an hour before Dracula comes into the picture. Like, Dracula's in there from the fucking get-go, which is dope. There's another motherfucker named Paul in this film. Every one of these movies, there's a guy named Paul. And, you know, I mentioned in The Curse of Frankenstein, there's a scene where Peter Cushing says to his buddy Paul, he like, Paul, and like shakes him. And I don't know what the fuck possessed me. I just like typed in Curse of Frankenstein, Paul. There's an edit on here. It's like 3 minutes long, and it's every time they mention Paul. So in Curse of Frankenstein, there's 3 minutes of Paul, or like talking about Paul or talking to Paul, and I just think that's hilarious. And I believe the guy Jimmy Sangster is the guy that wrote a lot of these films. And I know there's something Elder, I want to say, that wrote some of the films as well, and I think they're just obsessed with the name Paul. So, motherfucker named Paul, he's banging the Burgomaster's daughter, and you know, basically the Burgomaster's like, yo, this guy's fucking cooked, and I'm gonna kill this guy. So Paul, like goes from he ends up at this party where his brother and this broad that he may or may not be screwing is there, and he basically he gives the girl this present, which is a photograph like inside a little frame, and the burgomaster's police bust in, get the fuck on the ground, all that shit. He jumps out the window, lands in some carriage that gets sent to Dracula fucking land without so to speak. But once he gets to the castle Dracula, he's greeted by this servant of Dracula and Dracula himself, and he gets locked up in this room at one point where he's screwing this one of Dracula's hoes, and Dracula don't like that not much. So the guy ends up using a bunch of fucking like drapes and stuff. Like one thing about these movies is they love taking a bunch of sheets, tying them together, and fucking going down out a window. Like some. I just think that's hilarious. I love it. So he goes down the side of the building, the castle, into another room that has no exit. So the only way out of that is like either to fly out or fucking pull a Dracula and crawl up the wall, which is the first time that we see Dracula do some crazy shit like that. In a lot of these films, I'm trying to remember if he was on the wall in Horror of Dracula. I don't think so, but I know that in Bram Stoker's Dracula from 1992, there's definitely some of that shit happening. Yeah, so Paul ends up in Dracula's little secret alcove area, gets stuck in there. Later on, it's revealed that he was like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, meat hooked on the side of. One thing about this film, like they do not give a fuck. Like they're starting to not give a fuck about what they're showing. So, there's lots of fucking like Dracula's obsession with tits and neck in this is in full fucking force, and it sort of reaches a climax without what I'm saying, not without. For lack of a better term, reaches climax later on. We'll talk about that. But Dracula, basically the servant of Dracula comes and he finds the dead body of the Dracula's whore, basically. That Dracula killed himself. Like he fucking brutalized this chick, stabbed this shit out of her with a fucking whatever it was. I think it was a knife. And then his servant comes and sort of does like the dirty work, It's almost like if you've seen John Wick, like when he calls in the cleaner basically, and he comes and it's very sort of like it's a job, and he's like there fucking cutting her body up, and he ends up finding the little locket or like the little framed photo and keeps that as a fucking little jerk off material for later on. Dracula, or excuse me, not Dracula. Paul's brother ends up going looking for Paul. And he ends up at the same fucking building, of course, and that's where he, he ends up escaping. But the thing was, the servant sort of like led to the escape because the servant is obsessed with this little picture, and that girl shows up, and he's like, oh fuck. But he lets them go, and then the servant gets reprimanded by Dracula, who takes a fucking sword that's like red hot, and like I don't know, stabs him in the back. It doesn't stab him in the back, but like brands him, does whatever. He's all fucking brutaled up. There's this priest throughout the film that ends up getting savaged by a vampire bat, which is awesome, looks dope. A lot of people fucked up in this film. Like there's a whole church of like people just brutalized by vampire bats, which was dope. Moving on to like Dracula's uber fucking fetish. At the end, when they're all on the fucking side of the castle, it's about to reach the climax, Dracula is trying to accost this young lady who's got her tits out almost fucking completely, and she's got a cross there, and he uses one of the vampire bats to like get the cross off. So now, if you can imagine, like this chick's like Hammer Horror chick fucking tits with blood and vampire bite bats everywhere. Dracula he can't control himself, so he's going in for the kill, and Paul's brother ends up taking this like metal stake and fucking throwing it at Dracula, piercing him and all this. Dracula takes it out. He's about to chuck it, and this is where we get the death of Dracula. Lightning strikes this metal pole and kills Dracula. Lights his ass on fire, kills his ass. He falls over the side of the building, and that's the end of Dracula in Scars of Dracula. So I did like how he came to be. I think it's probably one of my favorites. I think I like the one from Blood of Dracula's Castle, or Taste the Blood of Dracula, which is the death where, or excuse me, he comes back via the occult sort of worshipping thing, like the guy like puts the powdered blood in the cups and his blood, and then he drinks it. Thought that was pretty dope. And then I think it goes to this one, and I think this is, yeah, you know what, maybe on a, depending on when you ask me, this might be my favorite way Dracula comes back, but it's definitely not my favorite way he dies. No, not at all. But I did enjoy it. My notes are out of control, dude. Like, I should keep these. Fucking show them later. But anyways, that does it for the 6th installment of the Hammer Dracula franchise. Scars of Dracula. Good fucking solid film. Lots of Christopher Lee action. Lots of vampire puke and blood. And, you know, I'm down with that. We got 3 left, so we'll see how it goes. I think the next one up is Dracula 1970. Dracula AD 1970. Which I think is one of those ones that you can find a lot on, like, those horror... horror 10 packs. I think that one might have even been considered public domain. I know that Satanic Rites of Dracula is definitely public domain, because I've got that on some of those shitty movie packs. But either way, I appreciate everybody for watching. Make sure you leave a 666 in the comments. And with that being said, adios. What's going on, everybody? It's Ricky with Videohomicide, back with another movie review / recommendation. Today we're going to go back to the year 1972 to take a look at a film directed by Alan Gibson, and that film is Dracula AD 1972. Fucking strange title, but this is the 7th installment in the Hammer Dracula series, man. And I gotta say, it wasn't too bad. It's very 70s, very, if you're a fan of 70s sort of exploitation-y films, you'll definitely get a lot of those types of vibes from this movie. The soundtrack is very much lifted from like a blaxploitation flick, and it's not too bad. It definitely has a very stoned moment in the beginning of the film where it's at this party. There's like people fucking under a table, there's guys getting high, and there's like all these old folks sitting around like totally just fucking terrified out of their minds about the whole situation. But I always have my little notepad thing here. So one of the first notes I put down is Cushing is back. So yes, we get Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing back together. Van Helsing, Count Dracula, awesome shit. So the beginning of the film is a flashback. Like usually these Hammer Dracula flicks, if they do a flashback, it's to an actual film. In this film, they just flash back to like this carriage chase where Van Helsing, Count Dracula, they're beating the shit out of each other on this carriage, and it ends up crashing, and the wheel, like the way that those old-timey wooden wheels go, is like all the spokes. One of the spokes impales Dracula and kills his ass dead. Van Helsing also dies right there, and then flash forward a few days where they're at Van Helsing's funeral, and this disciple of Dracula comes along, and he steals the dirt that was underneath the vanished corpse of Dracula, puts it in a jar, much like Taste the Blood of Dracula, how that blood was in the jar. Same sort of like little fucked up scientifical tube, but he snatches the ring and snatches like the stake that was actually used to kill Dracula, and that comes back later on. I don't think the stake does, but the ring definitely does. So it's sort of like Taste the Blood of Dracula in a sense, where like there's these group of people that are looking for a thrill, like this fucking like LSD infested hash party is not enough for them. So one of their friends, Johnny Alucard, of course Dracula spelled backwards, he plays the guy that's like the disciple of Dracula, wants to get everybody to this church to perform the ceremony, the ritual, the satanic rites, if you will, not to spoil the next film. But he ends up getting all of his friends, including Van Helsing's great-great-granddaughter, to this place where he performs a black mass and, brings back the corpse of Dracula, kills one of the girls. It's cool because when it shows that girl's corpse later on, she's like in the rubble and she's discovered by kids, which is awesome. I love when kids are involved in horror films like that. Like if you've ever seen Assault on Precinct 13, there's a scene where this little girl is buying ice cream and then she decides to go back because it's the wrong flavor or whatever, and she gets fucking capped, boom, shot to death by a Klaus Kinski lookalike. I'm just trying to read my fucked up writing here because I write it so small. One of my favorite parts about this, there's these two cops that are sort of trying to figure the situation out. Matter of fact, one thing I forgot to mention was this is the first time we're set in like a modern era. like it's set in the 70s, so there's cars, there's car washes, there's all that stuff. There's these two cops though, but they're looking for a reason to go like bust this house up, and he says he bets a pound of dog shit there's a pinch of hash somewhere. And I just thought that was so fucking funny, because I could go for a pinch of hash right now myself. There's talk of them going to do this black mass like early, like before they actually go and wake Dracula. They're just shooting the shit and talking, and this one guy has a good line. He says, "If we summon the big daddy with the horns and tail, he brings his own liquor, his own bird, and his own pot." So bird meaning like a broad. So I thought that was fucking awesome. So there's a good shot when, Dracula attacks like the first victim, where, her tits are covered in blood, and he's just like, having a fucking field day as he does. One thing about Dracula, he's the most horny fucking vampire on the planet. There's the way that they kill Dracula in this film, I gotta say, is very much out of like Platoon, or it's like out of the Vietnam War, because what Van Helsing does is he sharpens a bunch of stakes and sets up one of those traps where like you fucking fall onto the stakes and it impales you, kills you dead. And that's what happens to Dracula in this film. And it's a pretty good death, I can't lie. There's definitely worse in the Hammer horror, i.e. the fucking, just the water was one that I always think back on, but it's definitely not the worst bringing him back, and not the worst him dying. I'll definitely say that. So we've only got 2 movies left, and only one more with Christopher Lee. So Satanic Rites of Dracula is the last Peter Cushing, Christopher Lee Dracula flick, and then the next one is Five Deadly Vampires, or the Legend of the Deadly I forget. I always get those movies mixed up. It's like a Hammer crossed with Shaw Brothers, so like Kung Fu mixed with Hammer. Like I don't know, it could be a match made in heaven. It's been a long time since I actually watched it. I'm gonna have to dig up the VHS tape, because I'll be honest, I don't have Dracula 72, and watching it online was a nightmare. It's so... What happened to the good old days of bootlegging and pirating, where you can just type in on Google, you could type in, like, for instance, you want to watch Dracula, you just type in Dracula 1958, 1, 2, 3, or Putlockers, and then you'll get 25 options, and if the first fucking one don't work, big deal, you go to the next one. Nowadays, they're cracking down on that shit, so... I don't know, man. I'm looking forward to starting the Frankenstein Hammer flicks. I think there's only 6 of those, so that shouldn't be too bad. I've been having a good time with this, furthering my knowledge on the character of Count Dracula, and just loving Peter Cushing every fucking second. Matter of fact, the last thing I wrote on here was King Cushing. So, what can you do, man? One more time, I gotta say, my favorite thing in this whole movie was, I bet a pound of dog shit there's a pinch of hash there. 666, adios. What's going on, everybody? It's Ricky with Videohomicide, back with another movie review / recommendation. Today we're going to go back to the year 1973 to take a look at a film directed by Alan Gibson. We've got The Satanic Rites of Dracula. Yes, the 8th installment in the Hammer Dracula film series, man. I've been having a blast with this. And this cover this is a sealed copy, by the way. One of those thin... This is probably like an art piece now. Like some asshole would pay like $3,500 for it. They're like, that is a sealed cheap one from fucking Walmart. It's like, yeah, buddy, we used to get them for 49 cents a piece. But like these thin DVDs, by the way, they bring me back to a certain time. When Walmart did have like a bunch of these. Like my stepdad Richie, he got so many like shitty Chinese films that were like these kung fu flicks that were borderline unwatchable sometimes. Like, I developed a respect and taste for those films back in those days, but I feel like we watched a lot of bad ones. So now when I watch a really good one, it's, because we weren't watching like One-Armed Swordsman or 36 Chambers or anything like that. We were watching like, like some of the stuff that I still have to this day, but the stuff that I have to this day is still pretty fucking good. Like Three Evil Masters, come on, that is a fucking amazing film, super quotable. Wu-Tang's used tons of stuff out of that flick. It's one of my favorites. Secret of the Shaolin Poles is one that you're not just going to hear about, that I really enjoy. I remember specifically watching that with my buddy Tom back in the day for the first time. We watched a bunch of Richie's fucking Chinese movies back then, and you know, and we were playing chess. We thought we were Wu-Tang, you know what I mean? Like, that's what we lived. That we didn't sell crack or anything like that, but we fucking we played chess. We got high as fuck. We watched kung fu flicks and horror flicks and all that shit. Played fucking old games and stuff. We had some good times back in the day. I can't lie, but it reminds me of these thin DVDs. So basically, the story of Satanic Rites of Dracula is it's about like this cult it's more or less about this house where these satanic cults are happening, and it's being run by this like fucking super duper developer type, all right, that has this big sky rise and all this shit. But you know, Van Helsing's daughter's in this film again, different actress. Cop's back, same cop from the last film, and they're there taking information at this Satanic Rites place, or at this house, the Pelham house. They have like an inside guy that's got his ass kicked in there, but he ends up escaping. He ends up dying though. But he got some information. He took 5 photos. He's like, I got 5. He took a recording on his watch, but he snapped 5 photos. But the one photo, there was nobody in it. So right off the bat, I'm like, okay, well, that's fucking Count Dracula. And it was. But they end up needing the help of like Van Helsing to sort of like clarify if this one guy's involved in it. That guy ends up getting murdered. Van Helsing gets fucking shot at, but he ends up surviving. But his buddy that he goes to visit, that's like developed the bubonic plague, for fuck's sakes, like for the Satanic Rites. And like the argument is, okay, what if Dracula is, you know, wants to create the bubonic plague, kill the entire planet, then, you know, he's gonna die because he's gonna not be able to get sustenance of blood or whatever. And he's like, maybe Dracula wants to die. Like Peter Cushing, like the guy chain smokes like a motherfucker. He even admits in the movie, he's like, it's a bad habit, I know, but it calms me down. And I'm like, motherfucker, same with hashish and me. I'll say right off the bat, these ones set in the 70s, I wish there was like 5 of them. You know what I mean? Because they're just fun. Like these ones, like, don't get me wrong. I have respect for all these films, and I have a certain admiration for all of them. I love Christopher Lee. I love the Hammer films. This was like something that I thought was gonna, you know, take me a lot longer than it did, but I you know, in a couple of weeks, you know, nail out 9 flicks. It's not impossible. So, you know, I got my notes here, of course, my little notepad. So yeah, at the beginning of the film, there's this guy that's like, you know, they're taking information. He's like a weasel for the cops. He ends up killing this guy. He's tied up and he ends up strangling his ass, which was a fun scene. There's like a fun motorcycle chase scene kind of on like the grounds of this property, and one of the motorcycle guys gets shot in the fucking helmet and like fills with blood really fast. So that was pretty dope. Yeah, so basically how Dracula comes back in this film is actually pretty weak. He just sort of boots a door in on a broad is what I wrote down. So he just sort of like comes in out of nowhere. There was no real bring back, you know what I mean? Like there's no bat puking blood. There's no guy fucking pouring his blood and Dracula's blood. None of that. Kind of weak on that. You know, but like the whole thing is like they're using this scientist guy to bring back the bubonic plague. And at the end, Dracula like fucks those people over anyway. And like gives the one guy the bubonic plague. There's a bunch of vampires in the fucking basement of this Pelham house, like chick vampires. And they end up getting killed, but like by the lamest way. Like the sprinkler comes on, like the guy sets off the sprinkler because the running water thing, and I'm like, man, fuck, that's weak, dude. There's a scene where there's an actual tit on the screen. She gets stabbed in the tit. You see nipple. So that's the first time you actually see a nipple in the Hammer Dracula films. So maybe they'll show something crazy in the next one. I was going to say something explicit, but then I realized, you know what, this is a family channel. Van Helsing thinks Dracula wants to die. I already kind of explained that in a bit. There's a guy that gets shot to shit on a car. I'm totally blanking on that part right there. Anyways, Van Helsing makes a silver bullet. The only problem is he makes a silver bullet, but he doesn't like, he just casts like the bullet. He doesn't make like the casing and all that stuff, which, you know, it's fine, but I was like, what the fuck? Jessica gets captured, so his fucking Van Helsing's granddaughter gets captured. Dracula wants to eat her ass, all, you know how it goes. But Dracula ends up being this executive guy. Like earlier I mentioned, there's like this corporation, you know, and all this shit, and he fucking is the top of the corporation. And like this one, this one was okay. It was okay. Like, again, I love the 70s setting, but this one was just sort of like, what the fuck's going on? The way that Dracula gets killed in this, man. He gets tangled up in a hawthorn tree, which is the tree that Jesus's thing was made out of. The I forget what that thing's called, like the crown of thorns or whatever. It was made out of that. So he gets tangled up in that, and then Van Helsing stabs his ass in the heart and takes his ring, and that's the end. So Satanic Rites of Dracula. It's a good one. It's good one because you got Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing. If they weren't in this, I wouldn't even fucking bother with this film. No, thank you. But yeah, good stuff, man. I'm sad that it's coming to an end, though. Like, I know there'll be more Christopher Lee. I know there's more Peter Cushing and stuff, but, like, you know, Dracula, Peter Cushing, or, excuse me, Christopher Lee, Dracula, like, fucking phenomenal, man. So I appreciate everybody for watching. Make sure you leave a 666 in the comments. With that being said, adios. Oh, and also, oh, never mind. What's going on, everybody? It's Ricky with Videohomicide, back with another movie review / recommendation. Today we're going to go back to the year 1974 to take a look at a film that's directed by Roy Ward Baker, who also directed Scars of Dracula, and Chang Che, who actually was the guy that's behind like One-Armed Swordsman and a bunch of really fucking top-notch 70s and 80s martial arts flicks, so check him out. But this is the final installment in the Dracula Hammer franchise, man. I can't believe it. You know, it's 9 films and they all have their moments, and some of them are stronger than others, obviously. It's, you know, Freddy Krueger films are the same, Jason films, all that shit. When it comes to franchise stuff, like, you're gonna kind of, you know, not everyone's gonna be a banger. So I had a lot of fun watching these films. So the next sort of batch of movies that I want to check out are the Hammer Frankenstein films, although I might give it a little bit of a break, sort of watch some other types of movies, because I've been sort of deeply rooted in, you know, the gothic stuff, which I do really love, but, you know, I feel the need, like, ever since watching this last one, I really want to check out some martial art flicks again, man. So this film is it takes, like, it's a conjunction between Toho, or excuse me, not Toho, Shaw Brothers and Hammer. So two sort of monumental film companies coming together and making a Dracula, a vampire film. Like, basically, this monk is traveling along the countryside and he ends up going to Dracula's castle, and he's got this fucking like really badass oh no, that fucking chain, that necklace part, I don't think that happens just yet, but basically he shows up at Dracula's castle. Dracula wakes up. It's not Christopher Lee, it's some other guy who's fine. He's sort of doing a Christopher Lee impression, I guess. But, you know, he transfers his soul into this monk's soul, and, you know, there's these, like, you know, other vampire cults all around the world. It's not just in Eastern Europe, it's also in Asia and all this stuff. So he ends up going to China to be a fucking one of these 7 golden vampires, these vampires that are, like, totally dead. They wear gold masks. It's pretty dope. He ends up it ends up flashing forward like 100 years. So it starts off 1800s, then we're in 1900s. Peter Cushing back again. Fucking love this guy. He's like a professor they sort of like blow him off. They're sort of like, this guy doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. But this one kid is like, hey, I believe you, and I'm directly connected to this in one way or another, so can you help me out? And Peter Cushing, of course, being Peter Cushing, is like, I'll pack my cigarettes. You know what I mean? The fucking guy, all he does is smoke cigarettes and be a gangster, for fuck's sakes. He's a pimp. I love Peter Cushing, by the way. Basically, there's a ritual in this pagoda, which is like the, you know, when you think of Asia, like almost temples, Asian temples, Chinese temples. I don't know, like, exactly what they're called all over. They're probably called different things, but I think in Japanese culture they call them pagodas, and this is actually Chinese. So but there's this badass bat chain. It's like a big fucking golden chain, like necklace, that Peter Cushing, or excuse me, the 7 deadly vampires are utilizing in their rituals, but the one kid ends up stealing it somehow. Like, it's basically passed down from generation to generation. These kids that are this family, or these families of this town that are fighting against Dracula or the vampires. One thing that's really dope about this film is there's a really good fucking scene in a graveyard where like all these dead bodies are coming out. It looks really good. It's, you know, if this wasn't connected to Dracula and it was just its own thing, I think it would work. It might even work better because Dracula's sort of like you only see him at the beginning for a little bit and at the end for like a second. So it sort of plays along the lines of like Bewitched or like Black Magic, like these really, you know, crazy not martial arts, but like these Asian horror films. Like this is a good one, and there's a lot of good fights. There is a long fight like in a cave, really good fight at the end, and fights all throughout. There's a good fight in the street. There's this girl who's like a total rich broad that wants to pay for this expedition for them to go on, but of course she wants to come with. And you know, Van Helsing's son is there, but Van Helsing's son is like into this Asian chick, but I think that the, you know, the girl that's financing it is into him, so that doesn't really fucking matter. But there's a good ambush where these bats, they fucking they come like in, they're on the wall in this cave, and then they jump off the wall and then go behind like another wall, and then boom, they're like these big motherfuckers. It's awesome. Really good playful editing there. I liked how at one point, okay, so one guy gets an arrow through the neck. I remember that. It shows tits in this film again. The second Dracula Hammer film that actually shows tits, like full on. Peter Cushing alludes that like a statue of Buddha is the same as like a cross for vampires over there, which I thought was pretty interesting. They mulched Vamp with pitchforks. So there's a scene where this fucking vampire is getting killed, and they just mulch the fucker with pitchforks. It's pretty crazy. Basically, at the end of the film, like the way Dracula gets killed is he just sort of gets speared, and then he turns into ash. It was sort of weak, but again, they're not all winners. This one's definitely worth watching if you're a fan of martial arts films and of Asian horror, definitely. So, with all that being said, it's been a real treat talking about all these vampire films with you fuckers. So, 666 and adios.